They have said no hugging though, so that would imply no other stuff. Welcome back to Pleasure Trove, the series where we talk about news and pop culture surrounding sex, dating, and relationships. I am your host, Hannah Witton. Why do I feel really dramatic today? Not sure, but I'm really excited to dive into this stuff. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and hit that notification bell as I make new videos every week. We're going to be talking about sex and a pandemic. We're going to be talking about normal people. There's a lot to cover, so let's go. So in the UK, on the 1st of June, we went into the next level or stage or whatever it is of like easing the lockdown. A lot of people disagree with easing the lockdown, including Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So these rules apply to England. But there's some interesting stuff in the new regulations, and then I also just wanted to talk about sex and dating during lockdown and a pandemic in general. Hello, it is Hannah from the future here, and already what I was about to say in that clip is out of date because things are changing really fast. So what I talked about in that clip were the regulations that the government announced from the 1st of June, which eased some lockdown restrictions, but still didn't allow people to go visit their friends and family inside their homes if you were from different households, which inadvertently made sex between people who do not live together illegal. This is 2020, guys. What is happening? And then in that clip, I said this. Do you think maybe there could be a rule for teaming up with one person who you like hang out with in private with, and so then you could have sex with them if you wanted? So basically like merging households, which wasn't an original idea. Lots of people have been throwing it around as a possibility. And now we come to the regulations that the government announced for the 15th of June that came into effect then. And now, introducing the support bubble. What the fuck is a support bubble? You might be thinking. My initial assumption was that two households could merge and effectively behave as if they were one household. And I got really excited about seeing my friends. Well, one friend, you've got to pick your person. However, it doesn't apply to me because I live with somebody else already. The support bubble is for adults who live alone or a single parent family where the children are under 18, and they are allowed to create a support bubble with one other household. And that household can have more than one person in it. But you yourself have to be a singleton or a single parent. Now, the good news is that this means that a lot of couples who have been living separately during lockdown and not able to see each other can see each other again. If you create a support bubble, you're allowed to visit each other in your homes without socially distancing and stay the night. Ooh, lots of lockdown sleepovers. However, if you and your partner live separately, but you both live with housemates or family, then afraid not, you can't. So that is my understanding of where we're at right now in terms of how this lockdown is affecting couples, horny singletons. If you do live alone and you are single, then you can pick one person. But the idea is that this support bubble is exclusive. You can't be going and doing it with loads of different households. Oh no, you pick one household and that is your household, and support bubbles are monogamous, is how things are looking. In the Netherlands, they're allowed to have a sex buddy. So it's effectively the same thing, but you have to have been suffering and living all by yourself for the last 3 months to qualify. Whether you agree with the easing of the lockdown or not, I do think that this is good news for people who haven't been able to see their partners during this time, and I think it'll be welcomed by a lot of people. Although, how the hell do you police this? Yes, you're meant to be exclusive with your household, but it's all happening indoors now, so how the hell do you monitor and police this? I don't doubt that there will be some people who abuse the situation, but please don't be those people. Okay, now back to the rest of the video, and fingers crossed that nothing changes between now and when you're watching this. If there is, I will just write it in the description. In other sex and lockdown news, jokes have said that condom sales are down, and no one is surprised because people are having less sex. But this brings up a really interesting conversation around sexual health and lockdown. Now is the perfect time to be ordering that STI home testing kit and knowing your status. A lot of people are now much more aware of public health and are socially distancing and wearing face masks, and I just wonder if that awareness will translate to public health when it comes to sexual health and people wearing condoms. And what do sexual health services look like when they're digital, when they're at home services? Obviously, there are still some cases where you will have to go in person, but is this going to change the future of sexual health services going forward? They've already been cut and cut and cut, and funding is so limited. And to be honest, I'm worried that it's not going to get any better after this. There's apps, there's STI home kits, there's online prescriptions, there's online consultations. But an interesting conversation to have is, what is the deal with privacy, security, and safeguarding if you need to do a physical examination via a video chat or sending photos? Like, that might actually have to be a possibility. Like, we don't know, but is there a protocol in place if something like that is needed? I really do hope that everyone's sexual health and sexual well-being is okay right now. And remember, if you've got the lockdown horn, masturbation is the safest form of sex, not just for the spread of STIs, but for the spread of coronavirus too. And when this is all over, please use condoms. Moving on from the UK government being a shit show to YouTube being a shit show, the Women in Sex Tech conference happened last month, and they were meant to be hosting it on YouTube, like an online conference, but it was removed for violating YouTube's policies. The conference still went ahead on a different platform called Crowdcast. Shout out to Crowdcast. I use Crowdcast for my Patreon live streams, so big fan. And the conference was to raise awareness and demonstrate the impact of COVID-19 on the intersection of human sexuality and technology. So Women of Sex Tech is a network of loads of different women who work in sex tech, you guessed it. YouTube did make a statement to say that it was removed in error, and it's because they've had to reduce the number of human moderators because of COVID-19, and so they're relying much more heavily on algorithms right now, and it was flagged by that. But I think it's important to remember that algorithms are written by people, and people live and work in a society that is scared of sex, and this fear of sex is built into algorithms. And this fear of sex doesn't just stigmatize pornography and sex workers, it also leaks into including sex education content, even if it's for children, in that category, because these platforms are just flagging it and they see sex and they just think, oh, that's porn. And we see it a lot with YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and we are not going to get anywhere in terms of sexual health, sexual rights, and sexual well-being and LGBTQ+ equality if we are scared of sex. That's my little 2 cents about that. I have a book recommendation for you, which is Eat Gay Love by Callum McSwiggan. Callum is a friend of mine, and this is a proof copy that was kindly gifted to me. It's out on the 9th of July, and you can pre-order now, and it is a memoir about his travels around the world after his fiance broke up with him. Callum is a young gay man, not young anymore, he's 30, no, that's not old at all. And it's about his experiences traveling as a gay man and a lot of the different queer people that he meets. For a non-fiction book, I devoured this. It is so beautifully written, and you just fall in love with like all of the different people that he meets, and his stories are absolutely insane sometimes. I describe this book as an LGBTQ+ manifesto plus juicy gossip. Like, that's kind of how I see this book. And it's really interesting to read about some of the things that Callum has to consider when traveling as a gay person that I wouldn't have to consider. But then there's some things that he does that I'm like, oh, as a woman, I would never do that. Like, I would never be able to do that. And so it's really interesting seeing those differences in how we would behave when traveling because of who we are. Also, if you are sick of being indoors, being at home, and not being able to go anywhere, and you want a little travel escapism, also that. It's fab, and I'm so proud of my friend, so I just wanted to give it a little plug here. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about normal people. Spoilers for normal people. Are there really spoilers? It's just about two people who have a on-off relationship. Will they, won't they? Spoiler alert. They do, question mark? It's a bit ambiguous at the end. I read the book right before watching the series, so both of them are very fresh in my minds. Now, we won't get into the whole package, i.e. the cinematography, the acting, both gorgeous, but I want to get into the way that relationships and sex were depicted in the show, because there's a lot of sex. The first time that our two main characters, Marianne and Connell, have sex with each other, there is verbal and explicit consent, and we even see a conversation about condom use and the condom coming out and everything. So to me, I was like, that first sex scene that we see, I was just like, oh my God, bravo, bravo. Like, when do we ever see condoms in TV or in movies? I think there is a lot to praise about normal people, but then there's also a lot to criticize in terms of the relationship and the sexual relationships. Ultimately, it's about two people who are really bad at communication. They have this amazing sexual chemistry and sexual relationship, and I think that there is this assumption that if you have this like sexual spark with someone, then that is going to translate into a good, healthy relationship. But as we see with Marianne and Connell, it just doesn't. They think because they have this connection that they can read each other's minds, that they know exactly what they're thinking, but we just see time and time again they're absolutely poor communication, and them misunderstanding each other leads to them breaking up when actually what they both wanted to do was move in with each other. How can you be that bad? But I think it's because they just assumed, because they had this like sexual chemistry, that everything else would fall into place and they wouldn't have to work at the other stuff. If you want to dive in deeper to the depictions of sex and relationships, especially the kink side of things, which I didn't think was great. I mean, it's part of the story that Marianne is like exploring kink as a way of almost self-harming herself through other people. So it's not a positive portrayal of kink. I'm not denying that that is some people's experiences, but when we have such a limited representation of kink in the media, you just kind of hope that it will be treated sensitively. But yes, as I was saying, if you want to get into more of that stuff, and also just a lot of the stuff around it still being a centered romantic relationship and a centered like heteronormative romantic relationship, then I would highly recommend listening to Meg, John and Justin's podcast episode about normal people. Just if you want to really pick it all apart, I recommend their podcast all the time. I absolutely love it. But one of the other things that I wanted to draw your attention to was the fact that they worked with an intimacy coordinator on set. And I've been reading a lot more about intimacy coordinators, and the specific one who was used for normal people was also used for sex education, which is Ita O'Brien. And she's basically come up with these intimacy guidelines on set. And this is relatively new. Like within the last few years, this is really becoming at the forefront of the conversation, especially since Me Too, making sure that actors are safe on set when it comes to doing intimate scenes, and that nothing is sprung on them last minute, and that everybody knows exactly what is going to happen. Everything is choreographed and workshopped and talked through, and there is communication there, and they know that they can stop at any time if they feel uncomfortable. It's really amazing reading about these guidelines and what they're doing, because when you think about it, there's a stunt coordinator for when an actor is potentially going to be putting themselves in physical danger. And so having an intimacy coordinator there is doing the exact same thing for when actors are potentially going to be putting themselves in emotional danger. And I just think it's brilliant. I want to get Ita O'Brien on my podcast, working on that. But considering how intimate, graphic, and intense the sex scenes in Normal People are, and especially there being a lot of full frontal nudity, I was very pleased and reassured to see that there was an intimacy coordinator on set, and a lot of the conversations around how they made the actors feel at ease and it's being like a safe and professional environment. And I'm almost just like, how does one become an intimacy coordinator? Because that sounds like an amazing job. And I have another TV recommendation for you, which is actually another documentary from Netflix. In the last episode of Pleasure Trove, I talked about A Secret Love, and this time around it's Circus of Books, which is just so good. I watched it last night, and it's about this old couple who own a bookshop called Circus of Books, but it's also a gay porn store. And the documentary is produced and directed by their daughter, and it's about their family and about how they kind of accidentally stumbled upon running this business, how they didn't tell their kids about it. They were running this shop that was in the heart of the gay community in LA during the 1980s. There was this really emotional bit where they were talking about their HIV and AIDS crisis and how a lot of their employees were dying from it. It also covered the Reagan administration's crackdown on pornography and how they got entangled with that. Their son is gay, and they talked about him coming out, and the mother comes from quite a religious Jewish background, and how even though in her work life and in her business she was dealing with gay people all the time and was absolutely fine with it and was selling them like hardcore gay porn, but she couldn't accept her gay son. And you see her go on this journey of the business and the personal not being able to conflate the two and then being quite different, to her joining this parents and friends group for LGBTQ plus people and like marching in a parade. And there was this old woman who was in a wheelchair with a sign, and it just said, "I love my gay grandsons." And I was just like, oh, this is I can't. Oh, it was very heartwarming. It was really beautiful to see her being so honest about why she wasn't okay with that, but then putting in the work. Even though she wasn't okay with it, she was like, I'm going to try and understand. And she sought out thinkers and leaders within her religion, but then also like other parents, and they joined like a parent support group, and then she became a leader within that support group. I was just like, this is amazing. But then subplot, it's also covering the story of them closing down the business because of the digital age. At one point she shows us the graph of the bookshop's sales, and it starts plummeting after 2008. So post-recession, also Pornhub was founded in 2007. So the increase of online pornography, no one is going into these hotspots and buying porn DVDs. Anyway, I've basically just now given you the rundown of everything that happens in the documentary, but I would still urge you to go watch it. It's less than an hour and a half, and it's just really interesting, really heartwarming, and love to see this straight couple just accidentally finding themselves in the gay hardcore porn business. Love to see it. Thank you so much for watching. I realised I covered less topics in this episode of Pleasure Trove, but we kind of went into detail about them a bit more. Let me know if you like it like that, or if you prefer like lots of little things and like Instagram recommendations as well, and podcast recommendations and the likes. Don't forget that after every episode of Pleasure Trove, I create a bonus Pleasure Trove reading list for my patrons. So if you're interested in signing up for that, I'll leave a link to the common room in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!